Hello, my friend Doug. I hope that your week has gone better than the last ones, and maybe your time has become a little more of your own. But I do not know. However, I'm sure we'll catch up. I'm not even remotely worried about that. In the meantime, though, this particular podcast is called Silence of the Stillness. And I will do my prerequisite, as I always say. Well, hello and welcome back, you lovely human beings. A special welcome to my constant listeners and to my semi-constant listeners, and a absolutely special welcome and hello to my brand new listeners. For those who do not know, my name is Kriket, and for those who do know me, you know that I didn't choose my name, but it's a nickname. Not that that's relevant to anything, but I've been wandering through some of my past journeys, and I ran across writing that I had done, and this comes from February 8th, 2002, but the preamble that I want to share with this is how valuable it is to keep a record of your journeys if possible, or think that, some way of recognizing them, whether it's through art, whether it's through writing, whatever your instance is or way is. I think, we often rely on our minds far too much. And I rely, when I was younger, I used to rely on my memory more. Now I'm a little bit smarter and know that I can't always rely on my memory. And perhaps you're young enough that you have a great memory, and perhaps you're old enough that your memory is still intact. Bravo to both of you. However, that's not my story. But I have tangentized for long enough, and I want to share with you my journey. And the reason I wanted to talk about writing it down is because there's references I make in this journey to previous journeys, and there's a reference I make at the very beginning of the journey that I have absolutely no idea what it is in relationship to. So here we go. I started my journey in the middle world. Well, it was my intention to seek an understanding of the connection between two events. And here's my editor's voice to say, today in 2020, I don't remember February 8th, 2002, what specific connection between two events that I was specifically seeking. If I had written that down, I wouldn't have to make an editor's comment within my very own recording. So here we go again. I wandered through the trees for a long time while enjoying the full moon above me. The path with no beginning and no end. Oh, I know this path very well. This is the path where I met the old man of the spruce trees who taught me to make spruce gum. Unfortunately, I also tasted it, and it certainly was not the best gum I'd ever tried. That was certainly for sure. And these are the woods that have held many lessons to me over the years. I passed by a hole in the ground where Spirit had buried me to understand the time and the flow of death. This hole is where I emerged the first time from a spiritual death as a skeleton. I shudder as I go by, remembering how hard it was to adjust in the real world after dying. I can still feel the worms crawling about my flesh as I decayed in an instant of my time and a year of spirit time. I remember returning here to this very hole, thinking I could make sense of dying on the inside and living on the outside, the lessons of turning time. Yes, I know these woods well. Over there is where I met first the moose, beautiful and regal and oh so very tall. And however, when you're as incredibly tall as I am, what can you expect? But the moose is tall, I am not, we all get the joke. Moose helped me to carry my very first dead soul to the other side. How long ago is that? Editor's note. I have no recollection of that until I read this. And when I read this, I remember Moose carrying the young girl who had died in my neighborhood. And I remember a feeling of absolute love and compassion. I remember the colors. I remember the span of the moose antlers. I remember walking beside the moose, and I don't remember how I picked up the soul and put it on top of the moose. I remember being told that I could only go past a certain point and no further than that, as the moose carried on. End of my note. All these things were running through my head, and memories of my spirit life were knocking inside my brain. And a voice called out, startling me out of my reverie, "Well, if you want to know the connection, come on over here already," it yelled at me. I would yell at you as an editor's note, but it's really hard on the microphone, and it's even super harder on your ears. Okay, back to the journey. "Look," this faceless voice said to me, "humans have a very short life. All immortals think so anyway." The faceless went on to tell me how humans are thought of as, "Oh, you're just poor creatures. I mean, really, you don't even recall that you're mortal, well, until bad things happen, and then you think about the next time you're going to do better than this." And this faceless voice went on in this long diatribe about how they are better and blah, blah, blah. Finally, I quit listening and wandered off. If I wanted a lecture, heck, I can go pretty near anywhere for that. Further along the path, I wandered until I could hear a voice right beside me. Yep, you guessed it, the faceless voice. "Listen," it said, as if I had a chance in any other choice in that matter. "In that short period of time, you're allowed to listen to the living wisdom." Huh. Okay, well, it had my attention now. "What living wisdom?" I asked. "We are bound to a form that is dense, the human form, and we are bound to it without very little escape. And we are speaking a language that is not wholly our own, a non-spirit language, that is, and that limits us." Well, this was making sense, kind of. Suddenly the faceless voice became my voice, and I heard within myself all the lives of accumulated wisdom. I do not seek to know that which is beyond everything, beyond all my being. Yet a part of me is forever held by that which is beyond my physical form. That part of me, that part of everyone, is playing in a living symphony with all the other elements living. We are gathered here to explore this union in this lifetime. Understand, each of us, understand that there is no sense in perpetuating the past. There is even less sense in the self-imposed boundary of self and self-creation. The interconnectedness of all things is the reality of our lifetime. We are all part of the source. In my busy life, I separate myself from the voices of wisdom and spirit. The more we open our ears, the more we will understand the very language of our lives. Everything speaks. Stop. Silent. Listen. Everything speaks. Seek not the silence of the stillness. Seek first the voices around you. Then the callback came, and I returned, feeling as though I had gathered my own wisdom and voice. I don't recall laying it down and forgetting it. I only remember now that I had to remind myself to remember and to listen. That's the end of my writing. 18 years ago, and still those things are still very true. To stop, be silent, to listen. Everything speaks. Seek not the silence of the stillness. Seek first the voices around you. Have you been in a place so quiet that there's a ringing in your ears, that your own blood is louder than the air around you? Have you ever stood in silence and felt the whispers of the Spirit speaking upon your soul? whispering through your ears, awakening your eyes and hearts. Sometimes in the silence accompanying contemplation of a journey, my mind wanders to the different teachers I've had through the years, some human-looking and some not even remotely. And they've shared stories and lessons and insights. The spirits I have spoken to through the years, they don't always hold the same view of things. I mean, you might think that. You might think, well, you're in the spirit world, so like everything is going to be like totally the same, right? Like, so love is everything, but not really. But sometimes, anyway, I diverge. But they have told me, the spirits I met have told me some of the most fascinating stories about their life in this world. But again, they don't always hold the same views. So the very first time I met one of my teachers, I remember meeting her in a wooded clearing with a bonfire. That's all there was, just a clearing with a bonfire. Now, I've talked about how my anchor spot has changed through the years, and it's changed again, I have to let you know. It's changed through the years, and I have also noticed when I was working with this particular spirit that when I met the spirit, there was just a clearing and a bonfire. As time passed, and it did, many years passed, the relationship to myself and her and the spirit world took on a life of its very own. So at the very first, my ancestor had a lean-to made of coarse boards tied together, tied to living trees, with spirit medicines and other supplies stored on the shelves. And over time, there became an attractive cottage. Then there became a lake or a small pond where a spirit that then attached itself to her, a servant, would clean my knives and the various pieces of clothing that I had or accoutrements that I had that were covered in, stuff. So there is that relationship of growing. There is that relationship of shift. There is that relationship of time. One of my lovely patients had a power animal retrieval, was listening to the guided meditation that I have for seeking your power animal, and retrieved a lion. And sent me a quick note and said, I don't know anything about lion. So I started to think about some of the things that had changed. And what I found probably the most profound statement that impacted this person was I said how much lion had changed. And it's very much similar to the changes that I experienced from a lean-to with coarse boards tied to living trees and spirit medicines to a great cottage to a pond to a servant. When I started in the spirit world and when I first met Lion was very young. His head came to my waist. He did not have a big mane. His colors weren't really very set. Then I received my first tattoo, and it was of lion. And I didn't like the tattoo, but I came into the spirit world right after and was able to meet Lion. And Lion had taken on the colors of the lion on my back. And I said I was very disappointed, and he laughed. He said, I really like the colors. Did you think that the tattoo was about you? And so some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, and in remembering those very first days, the relationship between Lion and I greatly deepened, and things have shifted and changed, as some of my constant listeners know and may remember. What is the most important part to relay for me is how much Lion changed through the years. Lion now stands where my head is at Lion's shoulder. Lion's mane is, I could put my fingertips against the skin on his neck, and his hair would reach past my elbow and slightly up, probably into my bicep. There are various scars that Lion didn't have before, And there are ways that we interact that we've learned over time. We've learned each other's habits. We've learned each other's, smart assery. We've learned each other's ways to piss each other off. And the scars that I have on my body that are continually in the spirit world that I received, one from Lion and others from being in situations that weren't particularly safe or fun, and both of us coming out battered and bruised and cut and bleeding. And those things really do remain on you. I mean, you may not remember all of the scars, you may not remember all of the situations you've been in, but if you are really intent on learning and working with the spirit world and working within that spirit world, you will shift and change over time. And the spirit helpers, what I find really interesting, what I've learned and gleaned through time, is that they've gone through a process of purification so complex that it's difficult for us humans to begin to understand. They have a global or even a cosmic consciousness, a collective unconsciousness, because that's a lot where a lot of them reside. And they take a very long view of things. It is working in the spirit world. It is working with my spirit kin. It is working with my teachers that have taught me how to play the long game, how to see the long things. They've received the double death, so both the physical death and then the ego death. And that precedes true compassion, so they tell me. And the spirit worlds, both the upper and the lower, as you all know, are beyond space and time. Our world is the only realm of suffering, tied as we are to the limits of physicality and trapped in time. Whereas our guides, our spirit kin, those who are with us, they're here to bring an end to some of that suffering we currently experience in the middle world. One of the ways that they help us in this grievous suffering or to come to an end is to help us to explore the roots of some of those wounds, the roots of some of the grievous acts that have created suffering from us. However, they're also can be very standoffish. Some spirits that some people have, they're very not standoffish. They're engaged, they're warm, they're compassionate, and so on and so forth. But not all of the spirits I've encountered fit that criteria or fit that description. Often, what I have found is that there is a hands-off relationship. Is that one spirit in the journey that I read to you earlier, is that, they think, they are limitless, they are timeless. I mean, not all of them. Now the ancestors that have come through when they've gone through the double death, when they've received, the physical death, the ego death, and their, purification, the complex, and all of those wonderful aspects to it, we have to keep in mind that they too, as much as they're involved with us, they're separate from us. The same as there are many people that I have love and compassion for, but I am separate from. And I can stand back and I can watch them in their own process, their own ego journey, and not have to be truly taken up by their process or by their ego journey, because it's not mine. And nor do I want them to step into my ego journey, my ego process, my wounds, my own journeys, right? We are autonomous beings. We have sovereignty, and we have the experience of being united within self, united within group, and united within the spirit, never losing our autonomy. If we lose our autonomy, then I believe we are in trouble. We've given away our power. So when we speak to the silence of stillness, when I speak to that voice that speaks to us, that those places beyond us, they come in many forms and many voices, whether it's your spontaneous intuition, whether it is the spirits in the spirit world, whether it's your spirit kin, your power animals, whatever the terms are that you wish to use for them. We know that we have the ability to hear, the ability to explore, the ability to experience And I believe that we have that ability because we have compassion given to us, because we do sit in a world that is challenging and hard and can break us and build us and break us again and build us again. And it's that repetitive cyclical pattern. And whether or not the spirits you work with are immortal, or the spirits you work with share with you deep wisdom self, what is encouraging to me on this spiritual journey is I have relationships that I didn't have before. I have understandings that I didn't have before. And I have pebbles that I have grown into mountains. Spirits change. Our lives change. Write shit down. Remember your lessons. And remember to go over them 10 years later, 5 years later, me, 27 years later. Go over them. What lessons have you retained? Do you remember dropping some of those lessons? Do you remember picking up some of those lessons? Do you remember now, oh, yes, this is exactly what I need to do? Those are the things that I'm reflecting on today as I contemplate the Spirit's voice and message of the silence, of the stillness. Until next time, I thank you for sharing with me your ever-precious time, your ever-precious energy, and may we continue to inspire one another. May we continue to walk on this path together, and may we continue to share in the love, the joy, and the brevity of this world. And also, may we learn to pick each other up in the sorrows of this world, where we remember to remind each other when we're going down the rabbit hole of fear and anxiety and all of the other emotions that we experience, that we can pick each other up, that we can remind each other that we're not alone, and that isolation may not always be a choice, but maintaining isolation may be a choice. So as alone as you may feel, you are not alone, and as alone as you think you are, when we reach out, we understand and we figure out we're really not alone. So here's me reaching out to you, and many of you have reached back to me. And I really hope that we can continue to reach forward. We can continue to walk along this path together. We can continue to understand. We can continue to fall on our face. We can continue to learn. We can continue to laugh at our mistakes. And so on, and so on, and so on. Until next time, I bid you a fond farewell.